Molly Taylor. Hopefully she'll get here shortly. And Barb Hicks, who wanted to join us, but she's in Australia. The time zone was a little too much, or the time change was a little too much.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
It's 5:32.
5:32.
Please set your clock back.
That's a really, I will call facilities. And second on the agenda is citizens to be heard. Seeing none. Third is approval of the minutes from October 17th meeting. Anyone want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
All right. All in favor?
I'll abstain from that since I was not here.
Okay. First up on the agenda is discussion of communication strategies. And we have with us Lisa Church, who is the communications manager for the city. We put this first so she can join us and then get on with her evening. And we had some questions by email and just in general about how we want to promote the RAP tax application process and get the word out to the community. So I'll hand it over. Oh, another thing that we heard from the feedback from the YouTube video is that people could not hear us, so please speak into your microphones.
Oh,
Perfect. Hi, everybody.
hi.
So I know there were some I heard from Annie that there were some questions, and I have a sort of strategy outline for doing outreach and engagement for the applications once we're ready to put them out. And that, of course, will start with updating the RAP tax website to include the application and the guidelines. And then we'll be doing a news release, of course, to let everybody in the community know that it's open, and that will go out to all the local media. I'll also be running ads and posting that information on the city's homepage on our website. And we'll be, like I said, advertising probably for multiple weeks because sometimes, it takes a while. We'll be doing a social media campaign to let folks know. And also, if possible, I'd like to be able to share the information with some of our nonprofit partners who have newsletters or mailing lists that they send information out to other nonprofits, and ask them to share that out for us as well. And we'll also, put it out to other partners like the Chamber of Commerce and, some of those groups. I don't know how many nonprofits are actually members of the Chamber, though. It's mostly businesses that are for-profit. So I don't know really how useful that will be. But I also have a mailing list for most of our water, sewer, garbage customers, and that's what I send our newsletter out to every month. So I'll send out a special mailing about this once it's ready to go. We'll be doing a reminder news release. We also could do some outreach events, maybe some kind of education event for qualifying nonprofits who might want to come and learn about whether they qualify or not, and also, what kinds of projects or programs might be eligible. And we could do an open house. We could do, we could try to work with, some group like Wabi Sabi or something who probably won't be eligible but might be willing to pull their nonprofit partners together to, kind of help us host an event where we can get that information out as well. And I'm also open to other ideas. If you have some thoughts about things you would like to try, then, certainly let Annie know, and she'll reach out to me, and we'll add it to our list.
Great. Thanks, Lisa. Any questions or comments? Or
I have a couple comments. Thanks for coming in and sharing that. Can I get a written copy of what you're doing?
Yeah.
That would just help me focus more on it. The other thing is, what about PSAs on KZMU?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And I know one disc jockey who might be able to do a special on that. Certainly, I'm going to offer that we would do a special on KZMU.
Yeah, and in fact, I think I forgot to mention this, but one of the things I'd like to do is arrange interviews, and that would include KZMU and the local newspapers as well. But everything I send out, Richard, I send to KZMU, to Molly, and
I assumed.
so I can also, if I get your email address up there, I can also send it to you as well.
And I'd probably stay away. I'll let them do it, Molly and them, I don't want to, well, we can talk
You don't
about
want to
that.
corral it.
Yeah, in my role as, a host. I mean,
Right.
I'm more than happy to do it. I just don't want to get in any kind of conflict area. So, anyway.
And when I say we're going to share this out, I also will share it out with the folks at the Mark and have them put it out to their, because they have a fairly extensive list too of arts
Oh, yeah.
organizations and artists. And Kelly's always been great about, Kelly and Melissa are great about sending those things out when I need them to, and I appreciate that. And I'll also share it with Pat Trim in the rec department so he can send it out. And the folks at the MRAC probably have somewhat of a list.
We do, yeah, we have everyone that has a membership or
Okay.
in any way signed up.
Cool. So, the big thing right now is, all of this will be waiting on getting the application ready to go and the guidelines, because the last thing that I want to do is put information out saying we're accepting applications and then there's no application to be had, so. But I understand from Annie that you guys are moving pretty quickly on that process, so.
So far, so good, yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
I like the idea of an open house, because I think a lot of people, kind of like we
Yeah.
do now, have questions. I think those questions, the community will have those same questions.
Sure. Just keep in
Good
mind
idea.
that if all the board members are going to attend, it'll have to be
Noticed.
posted and noticed. If only a couple of folks out of the 5 are going to come, then, that won't be the same. Not that I'm suggesting you don't notice it, but, we'll advertise it either way separately than just the public notices if they have to go out. But,
That's great.
and we should think about where you might want to do that as well, and you and I can discuss that.
Okay.
Because, my experiences and research actually shows that people are more reluctant to come to the formal kind of city setting than they are to go to a place in town that's a little more casual. So it might be good to do it at the Mark or the Grand Center, or, even someplace completely different, so.
It's a great idea.
So anyway, if you'll keep me posted on where things stand, and again, if any of you have any thoughts or, anything you'd like to see us try, just, shoot Annie an email, and we have regular meetings, so she'll get with me about that.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I think Wabi Sabi used to have a really nice outreach email list. I don't know if that's still active, but
I don't know either, because they don't put out their newsletter anymore
Yeah.
that I've seen for quite some time. So.
but then yeah, I think the chamber, if you already have like a flyer or something sent up or an ad drafted up, they can just turn around the newsletters to their members pretty quickly too. So
Yeah, Lacey's really helpful with that.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
She's, we'll do a robust outreach, kind of similar to what we did with our visioning process. So it won't just be like one social media post or one, news release or anything like that. We'll be doing multiple. And part of that will depend on what the deadline, how fast your deadline comes up as well. So, if you're giving people a couple of months to apply after the applications and everything are ready to go, then we'll have a little more time to do some of these things. If you're only giving them a month, then that will truncate things a bit. So.
Great, thanks, Lisa.
yeah, thank
Okay,
you.
thank you.
Thanks, Lisa.
And kind of like last meeting, I was remiss on introductions. We have a member that wasn't able to join us because we had a glitch in the email address that I had for him. So there's a Neil Clark in the world that's been getting all his email for the past month. So I don't know if you-
Gets a lot of my emails, yeah, for years now, I think.
I don't know if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, Neil Clark. I've been a resident here for 11 years. I work for the Southern Utah Wilderness Alliance during the day. Also active in lots of different musical endeavors in town. I'm also on the board of KZMU as well. So.
And are you familiar with your fellow members, or should they say a quick hello and introduction?
Yeah,
We chatted.
I was trying to catch up. I don't feel like we have to, do it again.
Okay, great, thanks. Okay, so moving on, we have the consideration of adopting our bylaws. And so there's a draft in your packet, and I took the shell of the bylaws from our water board, so it's consistent with other city staff, if you're wondering where some of the background of that has come. So I don't know if you have any questions, and open them up for discussion.
I have a comment,
Okay.
and this would be on the conduct of TAC members. I'm just raising, will a member of the committee be able to apply for funds? That wasn't clear.
No, they would not.
Okay, I didn't get that in there. If it's in there and it's clear, then I'm okay, but I didn't see it.
Gotcha.
Again, the purpose is to reduce any kind of conflict. Especially,
Yeah,
this
if
is
you
all
want, we
brand
can
new, we
spell
might as
that
well,
out. We can spell that out more clearly. I think
Okay.
it was kind of covered in conflict of interest, but if you want it to be a standalone statement, we can add that.
Yeah, I think it should be more clear.
Yeah.
But I'll get the sense of the rest of the committee too. I mean, I'm not, so.
Is that
That's-
Article 4, Section C? Is that what you're, is that where it's probably referenced?
Yes. It talks all about the potential conflict of interest, and you have to go outside the room, and you can't, urge your fellow committee members to endorse it. I'm just saying it should say right there, tax committee members cannot apply for funds through, I don't know.
I guess I would want clarification on that too, because technically a 501c3 wouldn't be like an individual anyway. So does that mean like someone, like we're affiliated with other organizations? Would they still be able to apply for funds if deliberations were done elsewhere,
I
or where
think it
does
could be a
that?
conflict if you were voting on your own organization's.
You wouldn't
Well,
vote on it,
definitely,
but
yeah.
you'd still be able to apply.
Yeah, I guess
But-
that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you can apply, you just have to remove yourself from the voting process or the discussion process.
And I
about
guess
that.
the question is is every entity an individual vote, or is the vote to recommend the entire package to council a vote?
Oh, got it, okay.
Well, we would be voting on the individual ones, though, before we put that package together, if we were bringing a package to the council.
Right.
And so I think we would the conflict would be resolved in the voting in the committee, because that person would
Recuse.
recuse themselves and leave the room, and as it's laid out in here.
Okay,
So I think we're fairly well covered.
okay.
Okay.
And just at our next meeting, I can get some legal clarification from our attorneys as well, to see, also the letter of the law and also perception is something that we need to think about as well.
Sure.
Any other comments?
That's pretty much it. I think they look well prepared, and
Do you want to wait until we have further clarification before we adopt these for any conflict of interest, or?
Do we have a quorum?
We do have a quorum.
Okay.
Well, we haven't, our bylaws establish what quorum is. So technically we don't, but we were proposing
Oh.
that 3, or the majority of the voting members, which is 5, so 3 would be quorum.
I'd be happy to move the minutes as presented, as presented. I mean, the issue that I brought up, certainly can be addressed, so. But to get this going, I would recommend we adopt the bylaws as presented here tonight.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye?
Aye.
Okay, great. That was going smoothly. And so kind of the heart of our, our work here in the first couple of months is kind of coming up with our guidelines and then refining the application project or application process. And so we had some discussions at the first meeting. It was pretty brief since we were all getting, but we have a proposal or an outline of what we are starting with for our guidelines. There were some questions and there's some areas that are highlighted that I knew it was a topic we wanted to cover, but didn't know if we were ready to define it quite yet. So I didn't know if we wanted to go through this, if you had any initial comments on things you agreed with that were missing.
I had a question at the outset on this capital projects are allowed but must be available for at least 5 years. As I was reading the state's audit, they talked specifically about a project that was funded that was to it's like a playground, but it was a playground for a 501c3, I believe.
Right.
That was public at the outset, but there was no guarantee that it would remain public. And I guess having not been here at the last meeting and had a chance to weigh in on this, but is there any reason why we have a 5-year limit, or we wouldn't just say the project has to be available for public use, period?
Yeah, and that's why it's highlighted. We wanted to have some guidelines. And some communities don't allow outside entities to do capital projects, which I do think, that can be for discussion as well. Capital projects might be something that we won't get applied for a lot. And I was trying to think of some examples of community projects that we've had in the past. One example that I thought of, not that the county and the city helped buy a stage for the county that's going to be used for community events. And so there'll be parameters around that. So I'm not sure how many capital projects we'll see, but the discussion if we think they should be allowed. Of course, I think the city obviously will be doing many capital projects with it. And if they do something like that, how long should it be available for public use?
Is that not set by the state statute?
It's not.
It's not.
I've worked with some federal funds. Some of them have them in perpetuity, which is maybe, we really don't know what a community does, but I've also seen 25 years and 50 years for larger federal projects.
I like the idea of perpetuity. It's people's taxes. It's everybody's kind of, paying into it. So I like that idea.
Or the end of a life cycle, like if a playground equipment might only have a life cycle of 30 years.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. And I do think that capital projects, should be allowed. I mean, the amount, if we're looking later on down the line where it said you could only apply for 20% or some amount, that would pretty limit what kind of capital projects you could do for sure. So I guess that's another consideration.
Do we want to further define that right now, or kind of keep it on the, to get back to, Ben?
No, I think there's consensus to put the useful life of the, whatever we said, public use for.
Do you think that's clear enough for applicants, or?
I don't want to, go over every word, but.
No, but I think
You understand what we're trying to say?
I do, but I think it's also fair to an applicant to understand the commitment they're taking on as well.
Okay. So?
We can think about it and come back to it if you'd like.
Okay.
It's without, so go ahead.
I was going to say, I think in perpetuity is a lot more clear than useful life of the capital improvement. I would be comfortable saying in perpetuity, certainly.
I think so too, because maybe if someone uses the RAP tax to buy playground equipment, more than likely at the end of that life cycle, they're going to apply for the RAP tax again if it's still available to replace that playground equipment, or something. So I think that, I think it kind of keep it during that life cycle. I don't know.
Concerns me because one of the, also applying for the pickleball grant, it was in perpetuity. So if we ever did anything on there that, not saying that the RAP tax would be that we changed the use or didn't have a pickleball court, we had to pay back the money. So if we say perpetuity, forever seems, I don't know, a little bit concerning, because if, say, a nonprofit had a playground and then that nonprofit didn't exist in 20 years.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, it's helpful to have the examples. Yeah.
I don't remember seeing like 25 years. I don't remember seeing
I'm just using
how
off of other grants that I've worked with, some federal funding that I've worked with.
I'll recommend we punt it to our legal advisor and say, how, you have a sense, I think, of what we're trying to say.
Right.
Legalize that.
I do,
Legalese.
or we can, and I also may be thinking that some art projects, I mean, they don't, or some are not built to last in perpetuity.
Right.
So,
I don't know. I suggest just bring it to the law department and see what they suggest.
What if you could put it in the application, like
Oh, yeah, if we want to.
we're applying for a capital project and we expect the life of this project to be X number of years, and I don't know if that's
or we
even more
could make
confusing.
that a question in the application. It's like, how long do you think, and also given the dollar amount, I mean, if we do go with the 20% cap this year, it's $18,000. If someone applied for a $5,000 art project, telling them perpetuity might be cumbersome. Yeah.
Right, but you look at like, take the pickleball court example, like someone applies for the RAP tax and puts in a pickleball court, some nonprofit. And then in 5 years, the pickleball court becomes a private pickleball court, that's,
So maybe
that wouldn't be good,
we could make it potentially in relation to the scope of the project.
Right. Or, I kind of look at it too, like if you finance like a playground and then some nonprofit says, oh, we're going out of business, and then they sell the playground, they just, what happens to those funds, and, so I think, I don't know, I think capital projects kind of open up a can of worms about all the variables.
Sweet.
Yeah, and I guess if you're looking at maintenance costs, sometimes an organization might be in really good financial standpoint when they apply for this capital project, and then 10 years later, they
Yeah.
that might be a really burdensome thing to maintain.
What do other areas do?
Or I don't know.
Like that have this RAP tax and do capital projects, because, there's some things too that like if, say the youth garden applied for it and used the money to buy a kitchen, they don't want the public to have use of this kitchen, because it has potential to ruin it or damage it or whatever, if everybody's coming in to cook Thanksgiving dinner. So, I mean, I'm just kind of curious what other places
Would do. Yeah, and I can look more into that. And like I said, several of them didn't allow it out of capital costs for outside entities.
That's an option.
Yeah.
And some did spend hundreds of thousands on playground equipment in their communities. And theater, I mean, there were some capital expenditures. I went through most of those communities that you gave us.
But that was the other portion of the RAP tax. That's not the community involvement portion of the RAP tax, right? Or is that?
I think a lot of them were the city or the county that
Yeah.
had those, but there's a couple that did go to nonprofits.
I mean, I think capital improvements for 501c3s, it makes sense to me to have some limitation on public use, as opposed to, I mean, it's just a completely different grant if you move it towards capital improvements for whatever falls into your mission and aligns with the grant application. So I definitely would like to, makes sense to keep something in there about, I mean, requiring public use with some limitation. I do see, I don't think we want to dissuade people from, with some in perpetuity language, that if that's enough to say, well, what's that mean when this playground's in disrepair, and do I have to tear the whole thing out to stop using it? Or is this creating a right of access to this private property? Or, so yeah, I think it sounds like we're kind of getting to maybe let's figure out what some of the other
Okay.
communities are doing, and maybe there's some guidance there.
Okay, so yeah, we can bring that one back at our next meeting, give it some thought. And, but primarily, I think this will be a project and program-based program, and not necessarily see a ton of capital, but we'll never know what we see.
Yeah, a lot of this could be determined in the evaluation criteria too, if it's something that we want to fund. Yeah, the last thing I really wanted to mention was just that some of the more visible projects might be more capital type projects rather than the ongoing program expenses, which from an organizational standpoint, I think this type of funding, I think organizations will be more keen on using it for like program expenses rather than capital, but can't speak for everyone. And I don't know. But yeah, let's see what other communities are doing.
All right, I know that location was a topic that I've heard from a few members, that this was concerning. This is another one that we want to kind of bring back to our attorneys, thinking that it might be in statute of what that exactly means.
Yeah, I had mentioned to Annie over the weekend, after I had read this and gone through with what other communities do, and a number of them, almost all of them, they're restricted to that community. So it seems to me if we're doing the same, it should be very clear that you have to be a Moab resident, Moab 501c3. That's my quick review and reading of it, and I would support that. I think, although I love the county, the county did not go for this RAP tax. Moab did. So I think our primary audience is the Moab 501c3s and artists and other recreational activities.
I guess I would take a slightly different approach on that. I feel like, well, because right now we don't have anything that says the C3 has to be within the city of Moab, but that the project has to take place within the city of Moab. And to me, that makes a lot of sense. We have a lot of C3s that are, Moab City, as we know, is not that big, right, compared to the county. We have a lot of great C3s that probably fit into, programming and things that this is going to apply to they are community-based, but they're in Grand County, or some may even be in San Juan County. But I think my sense is that the goal here is to benefit the city of Moab. To me, that means the programming or the project has to happen in the city. I guess I am less concerned about the physical location of where that 501c3 is registered. I wouldn't want to prohibit necessarily even a C3 from out of the area who wants to bring programming in from being able to apply to this as well.
I wasn't clear. I was trying to say the project should be in Moab. That's what I think we're saying the same thing. Yes, I don't care if they're from the county, but they want to do a project in Moab.
Okay, I was misunderstanding what you're saying.
Does that make sense?
It does, and I think statutorily, when they see the region, I think it's the area, they're looking at it from a tax perspective of where the tax is collected, so that's how they're kind of defining the geographic area.
Okay.
But I do think that, and I could see about where those 50C3 is coming from, but if it's more of a tourism-based event, I would think that we would potentially go more for things that are benefiting residents.
For sure. Yeah.
I would be in support of qualifying language even in addition, to, and I think in an email I had mentioned this, but takes place within the Moab city limits, for the primary benefit of Moab city residents, right? I think we can draw a finer line there to discourage is probably the wrong word, but discourage tourist-focused programming.
Promote
I don't know how
Moab.
that's a hard line to draw
Yeah.
sometimes, you know?
I like that idea.
But, and if it's in the statute, then it's just what it is, too.
Okay. Yeah, and then in our bylaws, we have us coming up with a mission statement. So I took a stab at a generic one that's right under the headline of that page. And it just said, supporting and promoting recreational, cultural, arts, and parks, facilities, and programs to benefit the Moab community.
Perfect.
So it's nice to have, not to wordsmith forever, just a statement you can go back to.
Exactly.
And also, if we want to...
If you need, I'll move that, because I'll move that as our mission statement if you
Sure.
need that.
Sure,
Just,
so move.
does anybody else,
Or if we can kind of incorporate it into
or do
the
we
whole
have to
packet.
mail that out or no?
You guys are quorum.
We are quorum. I
Guess it's-
have a feeling the other two that are here might want to weigh
We
in,
can,
but,
yeah, we can wait.
Okay.
yeah,
That's not a concern.
but, yeah.
I mean, also in regarding to the discussion of city limits, since our first year, I think that we can kind of have that for the first year and see if there's people we're missing or if that is a hindrance.
That's a good idea.
Starting off with looking towards within the city
Yeah.
limits.
Yeah. I think that's why I'm trying to really keep it to Moab the first year.
Yeah, we'll learn a lot in the first year.
Yeah.
Wasn't there a question though about that, like expanding it to Moab City-owned properties, like Old City Park and that, so.
That we could
Yeah.
do. And right now,
Yeah.
Old City Park is not eligible by the way our ordinance is written.
You're right.
That's a good point.
Okay, yeah.
Or Old City Park.
I love it.
I got big plans.
So that limits, so that also, I assume that also limits the city's portion of these funds too.
Within the city limits, and I think
Yeah.
that applies to everything except for Old City Park, which we may want to be eligible. I don't think it's urgent to have it this first year. We have a lot of
Yeah.
needs and going through a lot of planning processes.
Yeah. I'd like to circle back. I agree about adding some qualifying language. Sorry, I'll scoot closer. That the project takes place in Moab city limits or primarily benefits Moab citizens. I don't know if that should be an and or an or, but
And
also a project, because I'm thinking too of like arts can be interpreted pretty broadly if there was like a visual art, you know, like where does that take place? Or sorry, like digital, I'm thinking. But it could still benefit the Moab community. That's a very specific example, but if it's a kind of thing that doesn't have a physical location, I think the qualifying statement there will help.
Also, we have projects to be completed within 1 year of the grant award. Thinking this is an annual cycle. Any concerns or thoughts on that? Okay.
That feels good. I think I'd have to, maybe after the first year, if there were some issues with people, like not being able to finish their projects in time, I would be willing to consider like opening it up to a possibility of extension, but maybe not necessarily announcing that
Okay.
from that.
Yeah, and I think having an extension is different than awarding like a longer project.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But I'd also say too that you can't ask for more until the current project is completed.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
like if you did offer him an extension, it would prohibit him from asking to come back or in the next grant process. Yeah.
So that may actually get to like a question we want to eventually add to the application.
Right.
Have you received, you know, what is the status of your previous grant?
Exactly.
Oh, one of the towns did say that. Have you received RAP tax, and have you submitted the report, et cetera, so.
Yeah, I think we'll include that definitely. Another item that might be up for discussion is having a match requirement for the grant award. And I just threw out 25%. And that can be direct or indirect costs.
I think that sounds fair. Any-
I mean, I kind of think inherently you would, establish that match just by doing the project, but you never
And
know.
in kind can be part of that.
In kind.
Yeah. So that sounds reasonable.
All right, another one up for discussion is that any one entity can only apply for X% of the total funds per year. And I threw out 20, which for this current cycle would be a maximum of $18,600.
I like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, at a minimum, you're going to fund 5 projects a year. I think, there is something about this tax, right, that I think it goes to the same thing as like completing the project within the year. I think the public wants to see the benefit of this tax, and I think, funding, making sure we're not sucking up all the funding in 1 or 2 projects is probably a good thing, at least for the first year, and then we'll see how it goes. And that can always be modified, I assume, at any point.
Yep, we can learn a lot the first year. And I think a lot of them will be smaller. I don't know for sure because we haven't done this, but looking at community contributions, I think a lot of them will be small dollar projects or smaller dollar projects. So this might go farther than 5 projects for sure.
I'm curious how much normally went out with community contributions.
I
Was
was
it
going to
close to
defer to
93?
Kelly for that one. She ran the program last year.
The asks were so different from each organization, so you'd have some that were very large and were only partially funded, while others were, the dollar amount they were asking for was such a small percentage that you couldn't fully fund it, so I think the total projects on there were closer to 20, but because there was such a range in what was asked for.
And the total amount that we gave out last year,
55?
55. And so this almost doubles what was available to the community contributions. And the one of that group, only a subset would be eligible for RAP tax. So the community is looking at a pretty big increase in what's available to them.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm very supportive of limiting it for the first year and seeing how things go. I would hate for a project to come through that looked really exciting and just required a little bit more than that, and for us to be limited in our ability to fund something like that. But again, these are all speculations. I'm not sure.
And then the last item that we kind of talked about last time is that for this program, we would be giving 50% at the time of award, and then the other 50 after they've completed the project and all of their paperwork. Any other thoughts? And then the rest, we kind of gave some guidelines of what would be allowed and some ideas of what would not be allowed. I know, Neil, you had a question about the schools. And I think in reading the interpretation of their review of the RAP tax, they were saying that since any entity that's more than 50% funded by the state is considered a political subdivision and wouldn't be, so that was sort of the state's stance on that. But they would allow, if you wanted to go in as an entity or nonprofit and do a program at a school or provide a field trip for a school, you could do that, but the school itself could not apply.
Yeah, okay.
And then there was a question about magazines or newspapers from one of the committee members, and if that was eligible. And they're not here tonight to kind of discuss their thoughts on that.
I wanted to discuss that and just a couple of the
Yeah,
other
please go for it.
funds that it says they can't be used for. When I looked at some other communities, they said this is referring to magazines and newspapers. It specifically said non-arts related magazines or newspapers. I would see if say, a poet came up to us and said they wanted to apply for the RAP tax, and they're going to publish a special edition in, I'm just going to say Moab Sun News or some other outlet, and that's what the funds were going to be used for, a special arts-related publication. So I want to throw that out, that maybe we should, I think we should fine-tune that a little bit. And I'm comfortable that when we say non-arts related, so who might come to us? Well, maybe she's not here, but the Times Independent. Maybe we should say a for-profit. I don't know. I'm getting lost here. I'm just trying to say, I think there could be opportunities for us to consider granting a magazine or some type of newspaper that was a special arts-related, whatever. So that's all.
Any other thoughts? I think the term and somewhere in the opinion piece was literature versus like media. I don't know, I can't remember exactly how they phrased it, but if I can work on redefining that for the next meeting.
And maybe what I'm hoping we can do is already in there. I don't think it is. That's why I was trying to clarify it, but.
Okay.
So I have that comment, and then another one was again, rehabilitative or therapeutic programs. And again, other communities had in there non-arts related. And my thinking was, yeah, we're not professional, we're not going to fund somebody getting into advanced rehabilitation but what I could see is someone coming in with a program that works with senior citizens on working with them to develop art skills or something in that vein, but it's a limit. It's not it could be a 3-month program over at the Grand Center. Somebody wants to do that. That's what I'm saying. I don't think we should unilaterally say rehabilitative or therapeutic programs or explain exactly what that is.
But that would be under arts, so it doesn't necessarily need to be classified as just because, it could be an arts program for senior citizens, and it would still fit what this tax could be used for.
Okay.
So, yeah, that would be it seems like it wouldn't eliminate that.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
Okay.
And
okay, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say I would put on there, if it's at least after cash reserves, litigation. We're not paying anybody's, they're not going to use their RAP tax for any litigation purposes.
Cool.
That may be implied in some of the other language, but I would make it clear.
Sure.
If they got a grant from us and all of a sudden they started using it to pay for.
Oh, that's a good point.
Damn lawyers.
Any other?
Only kidding.
I mean, I like the idea of modifying the magazines or newspapers language a little bit. I mean, I do think it's trying to envision what we don't really even know is
right.
out there, but
I'm sorry.
I think about like zines and other arts publications that, for like a youth program that the outcome is to publish a zine or something. Like I wouldn't want to prohibit that through this magazine and newspapers language. I do think we could qualify that in a way that probably that leaves the door open for something like that. Mm-hmm. So non-arts related or non-commercial non-arts related commercial.
That's what others did.
So would it be then not organizations that are limiting the organization type by that? Is that
I think that's,
Right.
I think that's a good clarification.
yeah. I think that what Kelly said is what I was,
What she said.
So, like, if a for-profit company wants to come in and apply for this and do the history of Sandflats or something, we wouldn't do it. But if someone comes, like the Friends of Sandflats, came in and wanted to do the history of Sandflats, and they're a 501c3, and publish a book or something about it, then it would fall under that, and it would be allowable, right?
yeah, I think that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I'd be comfortable.
If it was
with that too.
artistic.
I know. Because you do plug in the historical part about it, and,
Yep.
and it's like,
Oh.
is it under the,
It's a cultural.
The
yeah.
cultural, yeah.
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 Okay, well, I can work on kind of defining that and
Okay.
a little bit more, but I think that's a good point. What else? Does someone kind of, anything stand
That's
out as
it.
something they didn't want to see here, wanted to define or add?
No, I think it's good. I think it's right in line with what many other communities are doing, so.
I wonder if there's, is there something we want to put in here around, as I mentioned earlier, like the community, you want the community to see that this is the money that they pass the tax that's going to these programs. Is there should we have any language or requirement in there to, something, it needs to say, this program was partially funded by the RAP tax, or if you have an art installation, it says funded by, some sort of marketing, cross-marketing there so that people actually know that what they're looking at or watching was paid for with this
I
tax.
think absolutely.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah.
In fact, Ephraim awardees must, in all their literature publications, state that it was funded by the city through the rep tax. And if they don't do it, they can't apply for funds in the future. Yeah, so that's pretty heavy.
That's
But
yeah,
Ephraim
that's-
has it in there. If you check that, they specifically state that.
I think that's a great idea. I think it's some of the communities, and I think it was St. George who's done a huge effort to brand their rap tax. So it's, but I
I wonder
think,
if you could create like a logo, like a RAP tax logo that gets put on, everything that.
That's a good
funds
idea.
for it.
Like the art trails, I mean, I think
Yeah.
they've done a nice job of knowing that that's what you're looking at as part of that program.
okay.
I like that.
Yeah. I think having I'm just thinking of things that happen internally in an organization where someone might like talk about it or like do a social media post about a program and not realize that they were like required to do something, Maybe that's happened at these gardens. So, but yeah, I mean, we recently got funded by AARP, and they have a lot of guidelines that are like livable communities, like you have to have all of this information on your social media posts and like on your site and all that. So I like the idea of a logo because it's like something you can come back to and like, okay, that's really clear. You could also have something in the application that's like, how will you recognize that this is
Yeah.
funded through the RAP tax? And then there's other things too where it might not be a physical object, it's a program. And in that case, I like the idea of something like Wabi Sabi has done for their partners where they have like a little yard sign that's like, this project was funded by your RAP tax dollars in 2023 or whatnot. And those usually last for quite a while and could be renewed every year and don't, cost a lot of money. So, yeah.
That's a great addition, thanks. Anything else? And then we did a sample application, and I don't know how much you guys want to delve into this, other than potentially the questions we ask.
I would like to start out by just saying that the written application is great. I wonder if we could also consider accepting applications in a video format, just because we are promoting arts and whatnot. And some people are just like, I don't know, a written application is really daunting.
I think that,
Would that be a legal document?
I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, if we had to go back, if there was ever an issue, I personally would prefer at least a hard email or, I mean, I love the idea, and maybe that could be part of the submission. But as a standalone,
well, I think a lot of the introductory stuff would have to be written, of
Yeah.
course.
It would
Yeah.
be a combination.
And some of these bullet points could be written, but I think someone could wow us with a video.
Yeah. I think it just gives people an opportunity to show, like, if you wanted to apply for some sort of capital project, like, hey, this is what we have right now, and this is how we want to improve it for the community. I think it could be a really powerful tool for those applying for funding to really tell the story of why they need it. Some people, absolutely, video is not their thing. And in that case, I think the written application is great. But I feel like if they answer all the same questions, or maybe they could just provide like an attachment, like if you want to attach any supporting documentation, which could include a video. I don't know.
Okay, yeah, we can definitely add a supporting.
I think it'd be really cool. I just, is
Yeah.
that if we're okay with accepting it, then I'm okay with it too.
I was thinking of where you landed at the end, which is like give the opportunity to add any supporting information. And make it clear that that could be audio or video or mixed media or some example of the work, other examples of your work, that kind of thing.
Sure thing. Okay. Yeah.
I do have a comment. On the application, it says on the first page, will the proposed project take place within Moab city limits? Yes, no. I guess, well, that's okay because we were just talking about if we wanted to. Okay, so
This is a.
forget that.
I don't want this to come out the wrong way. We give, I guess it's characters, not words. Okay, I was thinking, boy, 2,000 words in one answer to this is going to make our lives extremely difficult.
We can change that to a word count.
And
if
there are
it's
definitely
more clear.
there are definitely times where you apply for things and there's not enough space to explain what you're doing, and that can be really frustrating. But there's a benefit to having to hone in the message of
Be clear.
for everyone involved.
Definitely.
I think Summit County says your project, you can't submit more than 12-page application, something they restrict how much you can give them.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I thought the questions were good.
Yeah, I like it.
There were, overall, I thought the application was good. There were a few questions that I thought were just maybe a little redundant or could be moved around, like is your organization designated as a 501c3? Should probably just be at the top, because
Then don't continue.
then don't continue.
Yeah.
And depending on what kind of format, if it is a PDF, like, putting it at the top. If it's an online application, like,
They can't
it's
continue.
the first screen, like.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. Other things that I've just come across filling out other grant applications, number of part-time staff depends on the time of year. So I don't really ever know how to answer that one. You could just put like at time of application just to make it
Is
clear.
it important? I don't know.
Is it important? Do we even need to ask it? I would also say, I don't know if I would care, like reading through these applications, if I would necessarily care how many staff there were. So long as you can tell me that you have the capacity to complete it. I think having an alternative.
I think it's good just for the data,
To know.
Oh,
you know,
sure.
so you can
Okay.
go like, hey, this, this supports X amount of people, so maybe it's not important for the project, but just like on the data end of it would be.
Interesting to
good.
see
Yeah.
where the funding is going and what size
You can just put number of full-time staff, number of part-time staff, number of full-time staff during event period or something, or number of part-time staff during event period or something. number of volunteers during event period, or I don't know, something like that.
And we can probably get rid of the DUNS number.
Okay.
Is that a thing?
It's not even a thing anymore, I think. I think they changed it, yeah. Kind of continuing on to the next page, looking at the project goals and implementation. The last part of that says, and how this project will benefit the citizens of Moab City. I think that is already answered in the needs assessment. So we can probably get rid of it there. And then just like some language around, you know, in my mind, I don't know if others agree, but project and program like can be two different things, and if people can apply for both of them, you know, like a project is like a one-time, you finish it, it's done. A program, that's like summer camp. That's happening every year. It's not a project with a completion date necessarily. So just anytime there's language, so like on project target audience, is it project or program, or just like request, funding request, I don't know.
Okay. No, that's good. You can clarify that.
To clarify, yeah. And then continuing down, what qualitative and quantitative measures will you be using to evaluate project goals? Would we want to set just a, give an example, like, or what am I trying to say? A requested number, like please list 2 quantitative and 2 qualitative goals, or like at least one of each or something like that, just to give people an idea of what we're looking for.
Okay.
I think Emily has a good point, and as I was just reading these, and I have a copy of the Grantwell report that was done by BYU, and is everyone familiar with that?
I haven't read through it, but I've heard of it, yeah.
Where they recommend how to review, how to score the projects with relative weights and all of that. I don't know if that's what we're going to do, but maybe we should be thinking about how we're going to rank and rate the projects. So if we know that, then we know what kind of questions to ask. And that gets back to the qualitative, quantitative question. So maybe we should be looking at both of those things.
Yeah, these questions will definitely feed into the criteria that we're reviewing.
Yeah, so should we be doing both at the same time? That's my question. The criteria for rating and the projects.
I think one would feed into the other, so anything that we put as a question, we can.
Then
Okay,
we
yes,
can.
I think yes. To answer your question,
then
we are.
Okay. I'm just thinking, are we asking the right questions in that application? It looks pretty good to me. But
Yeah.
Emily kind of,
No, I would propose like honing in on the application, coming back to that after, then we can look at the evaluation criteria. If we have that solid, then going back and then just kind of like.
Going back, and if it helps, we can kind of flip. The next page just has some, just big
Okay.
bullet points. There's no matrix here or scoring, but just the bullet points of what we might want to evaluate on.
okay.
And that was just, just demonstrated community need, the benefits, the number of residents by age or user group that are going to be served, an organization's history of community services, and we can add to that also any prior use of RAP tax or city funding. And then I think Kelly had sent out a more detailed kind of idea of like subpoints to think about when you're evaluating. But I
Okay.
think that's a great point.
Okay.
Any other thoughts? And we can kind of define this in a matrix form, but I think we should have at least, as we go out for applications, I think the applicants should know what we're looking for and what we will be rating their applications on.
Yeah.
I'm curious about the financial need question, because good nonprofits spend all the money that they make in a year, right? They sort of budget for how much income they have. And so I just don't know how we're going to, you can look at a financial statement and say, okay, their budget is X. That seems like a lot of money. That doesn't necessarily mean they have capacity for new programming.
Okay.
Because they're budgeting their existing programming into that income, right?
Right.
And so I just don't know how we're going to decide that someone is more or less in need of funding.
That's a really good point. I think the original intent of that was, would this project or program happen without RAP tax? But that's a really hard thing to gauge, looking at someone's financials. And maybe it's not that important, but that was.
And anybody's going to say, of course not.
It's a hard question to answer as a nonprofit. It's like, I need your money, but actually I'm okay. But actually I need your money. Yeah, I agree.
We can definitely remove that.
Well, I think we should I'd want to have a better sense of how we're going to figure out how to rank that if we're going to go down that path.
Yeah.
Is there any other criteria that might be missing on this?
I wanted
Yeah.
to make sure. Oh, go ahead, please.
Just thinking back to community need, I know the city was the city that just completed the report on
The visioning?
the visioning. Thank you. It gets to be like, 6 o'clock and words don't come to me anymore. But I don't know, is there a way to briefly and succinctly wrap that into the scoring criteria of okay, this is what the community visioning process has shown are the things that Moab citizens care about in the areas of arts and parks and the goals of the RAP tax, just so that just to have an anchor for because the other way to look at it too is what they're saying in the application of this is the community need that we're meeting.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I don't know if that final report got specific enough.
Oh, okay.
And we read it as well. But one thing, we are starting our Parks Master Plan process, which wouldn't affect this cycle, but one of that is a gap analysis of what we're not offering. So that would be, for future years, really fruitful to see this is what the community wants and what we're not offering would get points. But I don't think the visioning process is that specific.
Yeah.
That's good to know. Yeah, the intention, I guess, is just to make sure we're not working in a silo as the RAP tax. Are we considering
I think it's a
the other
really, really
things
good
that are
point.
happening around us? Yeah.
I was just going to mention, we have the number of residents, age, user group. I want to make sure, however, I don't know how to get to underserved portions of the community, but I think that should be some factor in this.
Oh, yeah, that's
It's
in
in the
there.
questions. It's just, I think needs to get carried somehow into the evaluation as well.
Okay.
There is a line here, and this may address what you just said, project target audience. Please, yada, yada, yada. That's from Seinfeld, by the way, yada, yada, yada. Please include any plans to target specific age groups or underserved populations.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that gets into the evaluation side of it as well. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And then would you guys like to see a full matrix or a little bit more open-ended by category and points? Kind of what we want to develop. And then we can talk a little about timeline about what we want to put in the application process versus what we might want to develop a little bit later.
I just hope I'm just leery of a very lengthy process that people get bogged down in, and us too, then trying to, how many points does this get? Why does it get 10 points? Why does it get, those can be very subjective in a qualitative process. But anyway, it's, well, maybe the only way we can do it.
Any other thoughts? I think points can be challenging, but I think it also allows it to be subjective as long as you are supporting your reasoning.
We could have a dartboard on the wall, and the applicants, it would say, if you could throw the dart and hit your project, you get the money. Do you think that would fly? Maybe not. It was just a thought.
Just a lottery.
Yeah, I think scoring, scoring's tough, and it is always going to have a lot of subjectivity. But I think what it does when you're doing multiple projects, when you're looking at multiple proposals, it requires some level of consistency for each person who's reviewing it. It's harder to nudge that project you really love, like without looking just completely biased towards that project. Like it requires a little bit more of a balanced approach to how the scoring, because and then it is something that everybody can see and go back and understand why decisions were made. So it's maybe not ideal, but I don't know what the better situation is.
I agree.
Complicate.
I
We
wish there was
could
a
complicate it a little bit more, and there's a way that you can make a matrix where you have these are the things we're judging on. This is its importance level, and then the score, and then it kind of filters out from there. I'd have to look back at my notes to figure out how to do that.
But you could do that by saying this category has a maximum of 20 points and this category has a maximum of 5 points. Is essentially trying to break it out that way.
Yeah. I don't know what those are right now, but just thinking that seems like a way to introduce more objectivity into it, or at least more consensus in terms of what the goals are.
Definitely.
I think we kind of know our big bullet points is the community need and then the impact of the program. I think those are two big ones that probably highlight everything else.
Wait, there was a back page that I wanted to talk about. Where'd my notes go? Oh, attachments. I'm not a huge fan of the letters of support.
Okay.
Just because it, in my experience, just ends up being the organization that writes them anyway. I'm okay with references, but yeah, that's a hard one.
I would be okay getting rid of that.
Okay.
Yep, okay.
And the list of board of directors, if we could just put that in the application rather than as an attachment, unless there's a specific reason that would need to be an attachment. And I know this is just an example, document, but since it's here. And then most recent financial statement, would that be previous fiscal year? Okay. And then, yeah, again, the other supporting documentation, I think just saying that could be it could be a link to a YouTube thing that you uploaded, or it could be,
Sure.
examples of your work.
Examples of previous projects, programs.
Yes.
Is that, I just am curious why the board of directors list matters? What we, I'm trying to think not creating work for people, and it's well, what are we going to do with that? I'd probably flip right past it, or look at it because you're curious.
And you might already, yeah.
But you go online and look it up too on their website. I mean, maybe there's a reason, I just don't know what that reason is, and I'm fine if it's...
Use, but yeah, if it's not useful, it's not useful.
I know at the county, and this could be different, when it came to actually cutting checks and signing some of the legal documents, binding you to receiving and what you have to do with that funding, they were requiring the articles of, not in the bylaws, and needed to have the okay from the board of directors essentially. But I don't know if the city has to go through the same hoops. So
I
it
don't
could,
see why we need it.
I can find out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe it's a requirement, but
But I think you're right, just having their documentation letter of their status should be enough. But I'll find out if there's something I'm missing or not aware of.
yeah, and I mean, most grantors that I know don't require what we went through, it wasn't that hard, but like, for the economic development STAR grant funding, but there was just some like new requirements. I didn't know if that was just related to them being a government entity. But could wait until after funding has been granted to like, hey, now we need this documentation from you.
I guess maybe it would be good for us to know so that we're not, running afoul of ex parte communications about a project, or if you can
Oh,
remember
good
who's
point.
on the board.
Yeah.
It's like, oh wait, I can't talk to that person. But I don't know if that's.
Okay, I can find out.
Yeah.
I think either way, it's maybe not necessary. It's not difficult to do either, so. And so I'm guessing that we have a couple things that are still outstanding. We would want our other members before we do any sort of final vote. But I didn't know
Yeah.
if we wanted to talk about timeline and,
I would like to talk about timeline from one perspective. I happen to be looking at what the Utah State Division of Arts and Museums, where they're at in their application process. And if you intend to, and correct me if I'm wrong, if others are more familiar with this, the deadline for submitting applications is March 23rd of 2023. And that's those are 2-year programs. So if I read it right, the next chance to apply through the arts and museums would be 2 years, because they're 2-year programs. Is anybody familiar with those, more familiar? But anyway, I would encourage us to move with as quickly and as diligently as we can, so that and maybe you could double check, and I will double check that time as well, but just so we give any applicants who may also be trying to apply to the state that they're already in our system and can say, yes, we have this funding from Moab Rap Tax and we're applying.
no, I think that's good. I think we have this is our inaugural year, so we can look at what might be long-term, the best timeline. If
Yeah.
it matches a fiscal cycle or other granting cycles.
I just hope we don't take 6 months to get this going. That's mine.
No, I think we've moved extremely fast.
Oh, we're doing
in 2
great. I
meetings.
think we're
Yeah,
doing
no,
great.
so-
When I saw that March 23rd, I just said, oh, geez, we have to make sure we get,
Can you remind me again when these funds are available?
they've already accrued, so it's up to our process. So we've accrued a year,
So we have a year, so we can,
and so they're still accruing, but at some point, we don't want to accrue 2 years, and we want to get on a set schedule. But we've accrued a year, and that's now, or up until recently, that's available for this funding cycle.
so what do you think our timeline is right now for getting word out? I mean, we're going into the holidays.
That's- I think that if this committee meets again in the next, I don't know if we could meet before Thanksgiving, but before the holidays and have this enough agreed upon that we could, I'm guessing, by sometime early next calendar year. And then
I think that's a great goal.
We'll have it
Open.
open by the calendar year. Have it open for what? 6 weeks, 4 weeks?
I would say at least a month, if not a little bit longer, to get the word out. I don't think the application process is too onerous, but if people haven't thought of an idea, I mean, it might take a lot for them to kind of understand and
So
budget on their
realistically,
end.
if you were like, start at the beginning of the year and you advertise it for 3 weeks or something, and then you had it open for 4 weeks, there's 7 or 8 weeks, probably. And then
So we're looking at-
April 1st,
To get the funding?
to get everything gone through and to present to the council?
Ooh, that could be, I would say, like, we should, applications would be due March 1st, and if we could work that fast, but I would say April's not possible. It's very possible.
I may be raising a non-issue too. I mean, my immediate thought was, ooh, state grants. People may be trying to parlay perhaps rap tax and,
Sorry.
no, go ahead.
I see what you're saying, like, use it as like, we've received this funding for this project, and then use it as
A match.
leverage. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think it's a great point. I know grants often give you extra points if you're finding other outside sources.
Right. And we would encourage that, of course, I
Yeah.
think.
I'd be supportive of looking at what other grants might come up. It's hard to say depending on the organization, because, you know, I can only speak from the youth garden. We apply for a state grant, but it's for like childcare. It's like a different thing than probably what you're talking about. So, you know, maybe in a future funding cycle,
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
could consider that if there's like a major deadline that it seems like most of our, or many of our grantees were going for.
And again, Annie, this is our first year, and it's going to maybe take a little longer than we hoped, and I wouldn't want to see us rush to get the March 23rd, which I just happened to read. I'd rather have us have a really good process moving ahead in the next time. But if we can get it done by then, I would encourage us.
Can I do a clarification on that one? So they have several different, UDM at least, the Division of Arts and Museums has several different opportunities, and some of them are general operating support, so like that's what Moab Art applies for, but then they have project grants, and within their project grants, there's different ones, and
Right.
they have different deadlines. So
Then,
it's
perfect.
much more specific, and they aren't all with that same deadline that you had mentioned. So that's something to keep in mind.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Okay, so I guess we have kind of, any other comments? Did you-
I'm sort of curious now. I wish I'd been thinking about this when Lisa was here presenting, but is the idea to start marketing, you know, because you don't want people starting to think cold, like the day the application process opens, right? Like, I assume we're talking about starting to market this, like, applications, you know, a month out, even further out, saying, get ready, rap tax applications are coming, you know, starting on X date, so that people actually are thinking about that. And maybe we don't have to have everything lined up before that can happen. Sort of generating some buzz around it. And maybe that is the plan.
Yeah, I think we were kind of, also, we didn't want to announce too much until we had all the details in place and to have more questions, but I think that's kind of the idea of an open house. So maybe being open for a month isn't enough if someone's starting cold and going forward. But I think from the rate that we're moving, and I think at our next meeting, we will be very close and have enough that we are comfortable with. And so we can open the process. I think, yeah, an open house might be good. And also, maybe even that open house, we hear some examples that we're not sure. I've had some conversations with people who had questions, and maybe I'll just share them now because I didn't have all the answers. There's one group in the community that really they want a climbing gym in Moab, and for a lot of reasons that doesn't work, but they approached us asking if they could potentially put a climbing gym in at the MRAC, but they would, do the fundraising and then put it on city property, which raised some questions as if it's on a city building, should it be the city applying for that? It may not be our top priority, but it's, as a nonprofit, it's their top priority. So that was some questions we were kind of thinking about. Would they be eligible? I don't know if you have just, and I didn't have a great answer for them. And then another one, there's a local group, a nonprofit that does bike repairs for the community. And kind of their thought is a lot of people in town have some not so expensive bikes, and if they took their townies to a bike shop, they might spend more than their bike is worth, and so they would do something like that. Would that be eligible? And then the history of the community contributions has been largely arts-based. So I think that to get the word out recreationally, we would want to rely on our partners and our friends to get out there for groups like this that may not know this is eligible. But I don't know if you have any thoughts on those two examples that were presented, just to think about.
The second one seems easier to me than the first one.
Right.
I can envision if they were providing a free community service or something like that, that would probably fall within the guidelines. But yeah, I think you're right that an open house might really give us a chance to step back after and do some tweaking to make sure we're covering everything.
Question, did the pickleball court, didn't the group apply for funding and they got funding for the courts, or am I mistaken?
The city had applied, so the city had received a grant.
Oh, the city did, okay. I wasn't sure if it was a group or something did it, okay.
And it had to be on city property, I think, was
Right.
the,
Okay,
Or we
lots of
had
good
to-
ideas for county property places to put it.
okay.
Yeah, that's interesting. I feel like putting something on city property, I don't know, I guess I would lean more toward like, what's the least complicated way to interpret it? But if they'd have to have the permission before they did the application, and that seems like very onerous to like go through that and then apply for a grant that's like not.
And then, I mean, from a city perspective, like, this climbing wall might fit well, but then there might be things that don't fit well, and it'd be a hard line to say yes and no to people are saying, we want this on city property.
Yeah, and is that the intention of like the RAP tax? Like, I don't know.
You know, I like
Back
what
permission.
Neil just said about the open house. We may hear lots of people say, well, this is what we're thinking, but it really, blah, 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 doesn't fit exactly. And maybe if we tweaked our language, if we thought, geez, yeah, we didn't think of that. And we could take that feedback and modify our requirements. I don't know. Does that make sense?
It
Yeah,
does make sense.
Sorry, I'm just repeating. Yes, it makes sense to me to.
But I think that in that we would have our draft requirements, because I think more than open house would be us explaining what is eligible, but there might be some examples that we hadn't thought about that would, but I don't want to make it too open-ended.
We don't
Yeah,
want to
yeah.
expand it, because
Yeah.
then we start changing why we
Yeah.
created this tax.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
I like what you said. These are what are eligible and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
I think that's good.
Okay, do you want to set a next meeting date? I know it gets challenging since we're,
I think we should just keep
going.
doing it, understanding that, it's going to be a time crunch probably no matter what.
Right after Thanksgiving, I would recommend.
So the week of the 28th?
Or the next week in December, whatever.
So the 28th would be the last week of November, and then
Okay.
the 5th would be the Monday, the first Monday in December.
Works for me.
What was that?
The 5th would be the first Monday in December.
So I have conflicts on the first Monday. I have airport board meeting at 5. and
Okay.
stuff. So I don't know if there's any way, I mean,
It doesn't have to be a Monday, it just works so far.
yeah.
And the 28th, I'm open, people might be coming back from Thanksgiving, I don't know.
That would be the hiccup, yeah.
Yeah.
I will be
I'll be.
in Florida, but you guys go ahead and have it.
Sounds horrible.
I'll be back by then.
But you guys can go ahead and meet.
I also forget the 29th or 30th in the evening.
Is the 29th a council day? No, it's not.
No, we only
Okay.
have one meeting this
That's
month.
right. 29th or 30th as well.
I'm fine on any of those.
Works for me.
Preference?
It'd be nice to have one day back.
Um,
Do it on the Tuesday? I don't know, that's just me.
Yeah, 29th, yeah, would probably be better.
Okay, I'll do the 29th, and I'll just check in with Molly and Barb, and if there's some conflict there, then I might reach back out to you guys.
Perfect.
So that's Tuesday the 29th.
Same time?
Same time. And then I'll kind of incorporate your comments into this. And if you think of anything else, I'll try to get out to you in advance, so you have something to do over Thanksgiving. And it'd be great to kind of collect those comments before, so that we can maybe make that potentially our meeting, we could vote on this stuff.
Annie, I want to thank the staff for all the work that they've been doing. I know pulling this together in a short period of time is tricky, but I want to thank you and the staff, Kelly, Melissa. This is an exciting project for Moab.
It is.
It's exciting. And thank you for all willing to serve and moving so quickly.
Yeah.
Do we need a motion to adjourn?
We did, yes.
I would move to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
I
Aye.
All right, thank you very much.